Glory never fades. How a Chinese show took the anime world by storm. Picture this: your mother bursts into your room and her eyes fall on your computer screen. She sees that you're watching the king's avatar, and she is absolutely livid. Stop watching those gosh darn Chinese cartoons of yours. Just as you're about to object and tell her that the correct term is anime, and that it's actually from Japan, and you stop. You slowly turn your head back to the screen as the horrifying realization dawns on you. For once, and she's right. Player 2 has entered the game. A Chinese animation making its way to the forefront of the anime scene. 10 years ago, people would have laughed dismissively at you. 2 years ago, people would have voiced their doubts. But today, that describes reality. It's already happened. After years and years of running completely under the radar of anyone not living in China, the Chinese animation industry has begun to look outwards, and the results have been remarkable. It began last year with shows like Cupid's Chocolates and Fox Spirit Matchmaker, arguably two of the most well-known Chinese animations outside of the mainland. The former has over 2 million views on the Fansubers YouTube channel alone, and Fox Spirit Matchmaker is currently airing in Japan with a Japanese dub. Can we call it anime now? And just this past spring season, Kwanzai Jiazu, a Chinese anime based off of a web novel of the same name, took us all by surprise. As of November 29, 2017, our database entry for Kwanzai Jiazu, aka The King's Avatar, has been added to 117,000 anime lists and is scored at a healthy 8.10 out of 10. That makes it MAL's 434th highest rated title. It's certainly not the best of the best, but a dark horse that can make such a place for itself among hundreds, if not thousands, of Japanese animations is certainly nothing to scoff at. A second season of Kwanzai Jiazu is already well into production. If rumors are to be believed, there are at least 5 more seasons coming, and it seems that this series may be the one to spearhead China's growing stake in the world's animation industry. Long held back by rampant plagiarism, low production values, and government restrictions, it seems China's animators and their millions of avid fans are finally starting to overcome those issues. China's animation market is expected to hit $22 billion in value this year, surpassing Japan's to become the second largest animation market in the world after America's. Like it or not, 2025's Waifu of the Year may very well be Chinese. The world of Glory, reasonably stalwart, fresh, and compelling. The venue for one of Glory's many Pro League tournaments. In Kwanzai Jiazu, Glory is a popular, open-world MMORPG with its own competitive scene. Yi Xiaoyu, an extremely skilled professional Glory player, is kicked off of his team to make way for a newly transferred pro gamer. His famous player character One Autumn Leaf, the battle god, is taken from him and given to this young upstart. He is then blackmailed into announcing his retirement, which bars him from playing professionally for at least a year. Penniless and without a place to go, he takes up work as a supervisor at an internet cafe. From there, starting nearly from scratch, he vows to make his way back to the top of Glory's pro scene. This pitch certainly works, yes. But the op character in an unfair world premise is not uncommon, and one could argue that it's not particularly gripping, either. So then, how did it happen? How did this show make such a sudden rise to prominence? It certainly wasn't the hype. Promotion outside of China came almost exclusively in the form of word of mouth, with fansubbers and readers of the web novel leading much of the effort. Even we, your benevolent overlords at myanimelist.net, only made 2 Facebook posts about it before it started airing. Indeed, Kwanzai Jiaozu, which slipped in half unnoticed, did well largely because it was fresh. MMOs are often more work than play, and the fact that one of the season's top airing shows was from China was enough to draw many people's attentions. Toss-in events presented in the context of an unfamiliar culture and driven by an unfamiliar language, and we ended up watching a show that was, for many of us, as fresh as could be. And though the show's central pillar, competitive gaming, does this not seem groundbreaking at a glance, it's actually not something we've really seen before. Anyone who professes to be an anime fan can tell you that there is no shortage of video game-themed shows floating around in today's anime market. But where the majority of such shows used video games as a backdrop for what are ultimately isekais, Overlord, Log Horizon, Sword Art Online, or vapid comedies, niche gamers, Kwanzai Jiaozu used video games as a tool to advance a surprisingly mature drama. Again, it was fresh. The show took a familiar concept and presented it in a way that, despite being obvious in hindsight, had not been done before. Of course, freshness alone does not win the day. A chef can have all the fresh ingredients he wants if he can't cook, however, the result will almost always end up being a tragedy. So what's the verdict? Kenji. Kmei Animation and Film, the studio behind Kwanzai Jiaozu, cook? Can they make a good show? According to the majority of viewers, the answer is a resounding yes, but this is not without its caveats. Like a plate of Kung Pao chicken from your nearest Chinese takeout restaurant, Kwanzai Jiaozu is tasty, filling, and downright addictive. But to call it a technical masterpiece would be doing yourself and perhaps your bowels a huge disservice. The fluid action scenes were some of the highlights of the show. And oh, did it ever! view counts on YouTube videos with titles such as "This Chinese anime looks better than Japanese anime?" and "Sword Art Online has a Chinese knockoff that does things right," as ludicrously wrong as that title is, surged overnight, and the mods at R-Anime busied themselves with removing the posts about the show. It's not anime, that just kept popping up. Per the aforementioned quirks, occasionally wonky animation, copyright issues, and the rather simple themes, the show was clearly not without its problems. Some might say that it was all just a fluke, and that China's fallout of the animation industry will be as quick as its rise. But I highly doubt it. With Tencent, China's investments juggernaut behind it all, the Quanzai Jiazu IP is all but guaranteed to succeed in the long run. And it will be glorious. The Rising Dragon. Glory never fades.